Awesome. So I am super excited to dive into our first big sculpture project. But before we can do that, we need to understand the idea of something called contrapposto. And this is a technique that artists have been using for quite some time to make their statues of human figures look a lot more lifelike. So let's kind of dive in. Let's start with looking at what sculptures and what human statues looked like before the idea of contrapposto was used. So we can kind of see from left to right, this figure here is almost like they're standing at attention. So their shoulders are squared. Their weight is, even though they're standing in this kind of like V stance, their weight is very evenly balanced between both feet. Even the seated figure in the middle, we can see that if they could be standing at attention while sitting down at the same time, that is what they would be doing. Their back is straight up, their shoulders are squared. Even their hands are kind of evenly placed on their legs. We follow down to the feet, and their feet are evenly spaced apart. The weight of their body is very even and symmetrical all the way through the statue. Even this lady here, we can start to see some bend in the shoulder. This shoulder on the right here is slightly higher as she raises her arm. But if we follow down, she's standing straight up. Her feet are equal lengths apart, and her weight is very even all the way down. So before I show you guys some images of contrapposto, let's kind of define what that means. Contrapposto originated from Italy, and it is a term that in English you could say means counterpose. And it's defined in the dictionary as a human figure standing with most of its weight on one foot so that its shoulders and arms twist off axis from the hips and legs and the axial plane. Now, that is a whole lot of big words stuck together, so let's see what that actually means in an image. So we can see on the left, here's another example of an image without contrapposto. And this looks Egyptian. This is actually from Babylon. And then we come to the right and we see an image that finally has contrapposto. And now that definition becomes a little bit more clear. So let's see if this actually on the right, this is meeting our definition. A human figure standing with most of its weight on one foot. A human figure standing with most of its weight on one foot. I would say that that's correct. You can see that this foot is kind of on her tiptoes, but she's popping that hip out and she's resting on one foot. So that its shoulders and arms twist off axis from the hips and legs. So yes, her upper body is twisted. You can see that her feet are kind of pointed in this direction, and her shoulder and her face are kind of pointing this direction, so that she is standing in contrapposto. And this creates a really lifelike human sculpture. I ask you to kind of consider, how often do you find yourself standing perfectly straight up and down? I'm giggling a little bit because I think that would be pretty silly if we all walked around perfectly straight up and down all the time. We're human beings, and we carry a lot of weight. Especially, I know you guys are carrying around backpacks this year, so I am sure that 99% of the time we are standing with some kind of contrapposto. Here's a few more images I wanted to show you guys just to really emphasize what contrapposto looks like so that you can identify it if you see it in artwork. So over on this side, we can see that his hip is popped out. His weight is primarily on this one foot. And he's standing like he's got some sass. He's really proud about whatever he just did because he looks very lifelike, very human. If he was standing perfectly straight up and down, I would struggle to understand kind of how he's feeling, what he's thinking about. Just by making that hip pop out, putting his weight on one foot, we can really kind of tell more about who he is as a human. This image in the middle, even, we can see that power of contrapposto. This image is not even finished. There's no face, there's no fingers. They're still working on a lot of this, okay? But we can still see that shoulders popped up. That weight is pressed down into the foot. Even here on the right, we see this seated sculpture. He looks much more relaxed and less like he's sitting at attention than that sculpture that we showed before. So now you guys kind of have a good idea of what contrapposto is, where we started, and where we've ended up at. So next, I'm going to show you guys how we're going to use this in our project.